Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thanks for joining us again today. Sandy, you're here with us as well.
As usual. What's up
This
today?
when it comes out of me, it's you. It's like, wow, you're here again. Can't believe it.
Every time. Almost 7 years strong.
Yeah. Is it
Almost
that
7
long?
years strong. It's getting there, man. Getting there. 6.5.
Oh well. Luckily, most people listen to it on audio. They can't see us. Well, I'm wearing a
That's
hat.
right.
I know I'm bald, but I got the porcupine hair going on, so I got to cover it up today.
Hey, I don't know what that feels like, but I'm sure it's fun.
I still got the locks. You actually have to style your hair.
I've been going like all over the place, man. I was like a few weeks ago, I had the big beard going, longer hair. Back to kind of standard now. I think we're back to, I don't know if we're normal times yet, but we're in September 2020. I think I'm back to normal.
Right on, right on. What's new? Anything happening?
You know what? Next episode, maybe I'll share something fun. We're buying a big building. I don't know if it's kind of up in the air right now, but it's a big multifamily. So we'll see if it actually comes together finally at the end. We'll share the story a bit, but I don't want to jinx it because it hasn't finalized yet.
Oh, jinx it. No, you don't. You won't be jinxed. Yeah, and you guys put out YouTube videos all the time, right? So there's probably on that project.
There'll be something. If someone Googles it, yeah, they could probably find some stuff.
I just did a YouTube video a couple days ago. I put out one on our new student rental duplex hybrid that we're sort of in the middle of renoing, but I'm caught up right now on permits. We went as far as we could without them, and it's just been such a struggle with the city there to
Peterborough, or where is it?
Peterborough, yeah. And I mean, they've just been coming back at me with like one thing at a time. So they'll review it and go, now we want you to change this. Okay, I changed that. And then they go, now we want to see this. And that's back and forth, one thing at a time, probably 3 or 4 times now. And it's incredibly frustrating. They go away on vacation. No one's looking after their file.
Yeah.
Blah, blah. But yeah, it's been a struggle, but still a really solid investment. I'm super pumped on it. Go check out that video and see what we're doing up there. It's really interesting. I think it's called Duplex Student Rental Hybrid Part 2. So other than that, everyone listening should go over to breakthrough.reipodcast.ca, right, Sandy? There you can get the free report. What's that called?
Yeah, the ultimate strategy for building wealth through real estate. Get on our email list there. You will never miss an episode. We have had a couple tech hiccups in the last month. So if you were on our email list there, you probably didn't miss out. But if you weren't on there, you might have missed out. So jump on our email list. You won't miss out on a show. And you will get updates on everything we're doing. I know I saw you're doing a virtual property tour. Is that what you're doing too?
Yeah, I'm doing one this weekend. So we're going to implement those again. I sort of got lazy and stopped doing that, but we're going to try and implement them again. People seem to like it. You know, it's more of a, my business has always been sort of like a community thing, right? Like we all get together and go out together and look at properties. So I've really been missing that since all of the whole shutdown and everything started. We can't quite get back to the live ones yet, but I think people really enjoy getting together and being able to talk and go through some virtual property tours online.
Absolutely, I'm sure. So, yeah, that'll be fun to get back on. So they'll never miss out on an opportunity like that too when they get on the email list. So go jump on that, breakthrough.reipodcast.ca.
Yeah, and subscribe wherever you guys listen to this. I know there's a bunch of different channels where you can, and leave us a rating review on iTunes. That would really, really help us out. And people have been great so far. Like we get all kinds of reviews. I think, you know, we're up over, I don't know, 300. I think we're over 300 reviews on iTunes now. So thanks everybody for doing that. And get on, if you haven't done that, get on over and do it, please. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't have anything extra that I need to point out today. I can go.
We're good, man.
Peterborough. Normally they're great. I will say that. This is just the one time where things have been super frustrating. But
well, let's jump into it then. Let's jump into the interview. We've got a great guest standing by, Jesse Fragale. He's a commercial real estate advisor specializing in downtown and midtown Toronto markets. He represents clients in various areas such as tech, startup, not-for-profit, traditional corporates, and others. He's a leasing advisor. So Jesse's goal is to help his clients and find flexible real estate solutions for both their short and long-term needs. He's also a real estate investor. I know he's invested in some other markets outside and around the GTA. So we'll talk about that and really interesting topics. I don't know if we've ever really had a guest with this background. So it's exciting to bring on Jesse here today. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys. Hey, Sandy, Rob, how you guys doing?
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And you're probably right, Sandy. I don't think we've touched on this side of it, especially downtown Toronto.
I mean, we had to touch Montreal downtown recently in the last, a few months back, but I don't know how the heck we haven't done a Toronto commercial. 7 years. We haven't even touched on this. It's crazy.
So it's a small place nobody's ever heard of.
Yeah. We're making up for lost time.
It's too rich. Maybe, I guess it's too expensive for us.
That can be true.
Yeah.
We found the best person to talk to, and that's why we're doing it now.
There you go.
So again, thanks for being here. Appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk to us today. So, I mean, Sandy mentioned a bunch of different things in there, but we sort of focus on, we'll get to everything, but we mainly focus on the investing side of things. So as an investor, let's talk about that. How'd you get started and where are you now, I guess, with the progression?
Yeah. So thanks again for having me on. Basically, I got started actually as an investor, and then years later, I kind of moved into the brokerage side. But my first foray, if you call it that, in rental properties was a student rental property in Waterloo. And for those that don't know where that is, about an hour and a half west of Toronto. And it was actually while I was in university. I was living with 4 other guys. I saw that one of them was renting to us, and I was like, what am I doing? Why am I not renting to my friends? So basically, I started looking for investment properties in Waterloo, and this is probably around 2009. So there were some deals to be had in the area, and the first property I ended up buying was, I think it was around $250,000 back then. 5 female students from University of Waterloo. I tried to pretend I was like 10 years older and I knew what I was doing. And I started renting out to them. And at the time I think we were around $450 to $500 a tenant. So times 5. And that was the income at the time. And so, I mean, people always ask, where'd you get the money to buy it? And one of my pet peeves is when people don't say the source of their funds and they just assume anybody can buy a property for, the first time when you're young. And for me, have an entrepreneurial family, went to my dad first. He's like, I love the idea. There's no way I'm giving you money because you're in school. And being a child of divorce, my second go-to was to my mom being like, hey, he said no. So, and what ended up happening was we were able to do 10% down. It was, I think, $25,000. I put up half of it, had my mother guarantee a loan for the other half. And that was basically how I wedged into my first investment deal. And that was, I think at the time I was just turning 20.
Awesome. Young and fresh right into it out of the gates. That's awesome. And Rob, you're muted there, buddy. If you're thinking, I don't know if you're trying to talk, but
so it's okay.
Okay, cool. So what made you pick Waterloo? I guess because you were going to school out there. Is that right?
Yeah. So at the time, actually, my cousin, he was going to McMaster University in Hamilton, and I was in Waterloo. So when I initially started looking, we started looking at both markets. If you remember, back in the day, I don't know if it's still the case now, rents were a little bit higher in Waterloo, and some of the product we saw, I just looked a little bit better, less intensive in terms of doing work. So started in Waterloo, and then I slowly, over 4 or 5 years, rolled that first property into other properties. And by the time I left Waterloo, I think it was up to 4 properties. And then from there, that kind of was my base of investing knowledge and geography. And then, from there, I moved into Toronto and Durham and kind of grew it from there to what I'm doing today.
And you still own the first property there today, or did you end up selling it, or?
So sold that property. What I ended up doing was, because we had, I had a few properties in Waterloo that had appreciated, And I started working in Toronto downtown. What I did was I took some of the capital there, sold those properties, and bought a few pre-constructions in Toronto, because I'm sure you guys remember, even as recently as a few years ago, was just a crazy run on condos in valuation, and kind of, took a bit of a gamble on them, but would have still rented them. Ended up assigning or flipping a few of those, and kind of parlayed that into the next investment. So I think it was after leaving Waterloo, I kept those properties for a few years and then slowly sold each one.
And pre-construction, what was the experience like with that? We've talked about that a bit on the show, but was that what made you get into that? Was it just the quick kind of flip around assignment sort of a strategy that made sense, or what was your thoughts going into that and how to play out?
Yeah, initially, no, it wasn't to assign at all. Like what I found was I bought my pre-construction condo prior to moving to Toronto, and I kind of saw what was going on in Toronto in terms of kind of the values that were going up. And I saw basically people that were buying in my condominium were flipping their contracts, were assigning their contracts, which for those that haven't done that before, it's, just simply basically selling your rights of ownership of the contract itself. So assigning that for a fee. And, it was something that I always tell people, be very cautious if you do it. As you guys know, make sure you have a professional helping you with that, and make sure you're looking at your tax situation with that too, because, you can't just buy a condo, it goes up for $50,000 and you think you made $50,000. Oftentimes it's not capital gains, depending on how often you do it and the circumstances. And then in addition to that, there's HST, GST, just items that you should be aware of. You may have to pay that back to the builder. So it was a good experience to kind of go through that. I find that today it's harder and harder to do. And, I think there was kind of a frenzy in Canada, especially in Vancouver, where people started to look at, what people were doing specifically with these contracts. Not that it can't be done, but you just really need to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's.
Yeah, because I have run into quite a few people who have thought they could assign their agreement to buy it, right, and then they weren't able to. So
yeah, for sure. And it's usually stipulated. That's a great point. If the builder stipulates in the contract, we do not allow assignments, then you can't be in contravention of that. Sometimes builders will put it, pay us $3,000, pay us $5,000, some sort of assignment fee. But then oftentimes they'll have a time period where you are or are not allowed to do that, and they don't want you competing with their own sales, is usually the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because they're selling off their last ones at the end for the top of whatever their range was. That's going to be the top, right? And you're going to come in probably a little under because you bought it for
exactly
a lot lower a few years back, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the commercial investing world. There, that's what you do, downtown Toronto. Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, I mean, on the personal end, my partner and I, we look for multifamily residential. So, we bought an 11 unit in Hamilton, and I can get into that. But on the corporate commercial side, whether that is, office, retail, industrial, that's what I do in downtown Toronto. It's kind of a crazy market right now, as you guys know, just given the last few months, the shutdown. Retail is getting hammered. It's probably the most charitable way to put it. And office is kind of in between, as you know, like companies are the lifeblood of office. And if they're not in the office, a lot of the companies are not able to pay their rent. And then industrial and multifamily, we have seen just kind of going gangbusters. They're still humming along. I think Amazon just did 800,000 square feet, signed in a fulfillment center in Hamilton. They did 1 million square feet in Ajax. And yeah, they seem to be like the darling of commercial real estate right now, industrial and multifamily. So we'll see what happens after the government assistance ends, if it does, for the multi-res. But industrial, we were in, I believe, Canada or Mississauga in general was the lowest vacancy in North America for industrial for a while. We were going back and forth with LA, so it's not surprising that investors are still moving to industrial. And I mean, also the nature of the shutdown, you're still having things made. The fulfillment centers still need to be there. So it's an interesting time for commercial real estate for sure. And we'll see how the next 6 to 12 months pans out.
Wow, yeah. So I mean, Hamilton too has been. I know, speaking from here for me locally, it's been crazy. Industrial is just didn't even skip a beat. What when you say retail really got hammered? Obviously, I think most people kind of know that. To what like extent has that been? Is it like how bad is that right now in downtown Toronto or other places?
So the easiest way to put it is, what companies are filing under CCAA, for under bankruptcy protection or restructuring. And we've seen those come out of predominantly the retail groups. And if you talk to asset managers in Toronto or any landlords in Toronto, the groups that have come to them for the most assistance have been retail groups. So it's just it's a challenging time because their margins are so much thinner oftentimes. Think restaurateurs, think storefront retail, that they're the ones that it makes sense that they're getting hit the hardest. Another thing to kind of note is this wasn't, a lot of people think that, working from home on the office end or retail going to e-commerce, this stuff all predated COVID. It's just kind of gotten shoved, a little bit quicker than it was going to happen. But I mean, that's an opportunity. Oftentimes you hear the quote, it's not that we have overbuilt real estate in terms of retail. I think what we're looking at now is a lot of the repositioning of retail assets. So if you have a bunch of retail that, as you guys know, highest and best use in real estate, now it's, investors are starting to look at that. Oh, is there a play to make this industrial? Is there a play for redevelopment? So I think that's my guess is that's what we're going to see over the next few years, is that a lot of low utilized retail space will probably be converted, whether that's converted to residential or industrial, I guess remains to be seen.
I guess it depends on the location too.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, hey, listen, you actually do a podcast yourself, right? It's called Working Capital. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I started the podcast. A lot of people think I started it during COVID because the first episode was in COVID. I was like, I'm not that quick, but I predated COVID, and it was just kind of perfect timing, just given the fact that we have more time right now. So the podcast, it's Working Capital, the real estate podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. And what I try to do is I have investors on, economists, anybody that, has a hand in real estate investing. So I'm going to have a hard money lender coming on. And I was lucky enough to have, I used to be a contributor for the Bigger Pockets YouTube channel. So we had Brandon on, Brandon Turner. He was the first episode, and that kind of kicked it off. And we've gone from there, and it's about 45-minute podcast, and it's everything real estate investing.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. I haven't heard of it, but I'm definitely going to check it out now.
Awesome.
So how many episodes do you have?
So I think we're now up to 17 episodes. We just had the Wealthy Gardener that was on that was on last. It's a guy that basically, it's a really cool story. You check out the book called The Wealthy Gardener. It's a book he made similar to The Wealthy Barber, if you've ever read that, but it was basically a real estate book for his son, and just kind of a direct writing to his son about how he became financially independent through real estate. It's actually really cool.
Right on.
I haven't read that either. It's good tips.
So what do you view then as you think your biggest mistake that you've made in investing so far?
The biggest mistake in investing, probably, not starting, like I always tell younger guys, I'm like, don't wait for the right time. I was lucky enough to start early. I think I would have leveraged partners a lot earlier than I did. So, we go in oftentimes into real estate, and at least the mentality for me was, I want 100% of my investments. And, at a certain point, it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter that you're not going to have capital at some point. You are going to run out of money. And bringing in partners, whether that is operationally or from a financial standpoint, you really do see that if you get the right mix of, partner or partners, that you have the ability to really grow your real estate, and you find people that are complementary to what you do. So, John is somebody I met through brokerage. He actually buys and sells multifamily to our clients on the Avis and Young, the commercial side. So he has access to deals that we would never be able to take down, 140, $200 million deals. But he also has access to, comes across smaller deals that oftentimes his clients aren't interested, but we might be interested. So that was kind of when I met him, we basically bought that first, the apartment building in Hamilton, that 11 unit. And that was just kind of the marriage of being like, hey, I have experience, you have capital. Let's put a few offers in on multi-res. And that's what we want to continue to do. Try to find multifamily properties.
Yeah. So is that your strategy, I guess, now going forward type of thing, primarily to focus on the apartment buildings, like that sort of level, mid kind of, I don't know what you call those, small to mid size, I guess.
Small to mid. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great to, if people ask of like retail, office, industrial, it's great as an investor, but I find that, you have to have deep pockets, especially for those asset classes. If one tenant goes, oftentimes that's 50% of your income. So for us, even though the market is still kind of crazy right now to find apartment deals, we're still calling on apartments off markets, just like I'm sure you guys in your world, you're calling people, say, hey, you're a seller? No. Okay. You a buyer? No. All right. Well, listen, here's my number. If we could grab your email, if anything comes across our desk that we think is of interest. And, it's just kind of building that database and hopefully getting off market deals, because as I'm sure you guys know, in this market, once it hits MLS, it's pretty much useless at that point, if you can even get in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked your point about not waiting for the right time. I thought that was pretty good. Because we do see a lot of people going, no, I'm going to see how something plays out, whenever it is that they decide to look into it and then sort of back out. That's what you'll hear is, well, no, whatever's going on in the world right now, I'm going to wait and see how that plays out before I take the jump.
Well, you get something going on, right?
Well, you get
analysis
paralysis, and what's funny is you get very intelligent people that fall into this trap. And I've had people in the past that have been like, I'm just trying to figure out, do I put it in a corporation? Is it the same as an LLC? And I'm like, dude, look at the property. Just go see the property. Don't even worry about that stuff. You'll figure that stuff out. Don't worry about insurance. Don't let getting bogged down in those details stop you or prevent you from actually getting out and seeing the property. And that's another thing I always recommend to younger investors. Even if they can't afford it, they're always amazed when I say to them, they show me a property like, no way I can afford it. And I tell them, go tour the property. And they're like, well, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, go tour the property. Have that like psychological thing of you being in the space and actually going through a tour and being like, oh, wait, maybe I can purchase this. Because an amazing thing happens when you actually put yourself in the driver's seat and actually look at a property. Maybe you meet somebody else that's interested in it. You start realizing, oh, this isn't rocket science. Anybody can go look at property. And yeah, I always tell them, if you see something you like, don't waste people's time, obviously, but it's, we're all agents. Like, it's what we do. I'm not going to turn somebody down and vet them at the front door and see if they can pay.
Yeah. So how do you decide on a deal? Like, let's say, because we all have those concerns. I have that concern too, but it doesn't ever stop me when I'm at the time where I want to move forward. I'll go out and I'll find something that works. How do you do that? How do you continue to move forward when there's always something in the world that sort of says, hey, maybe back off right now?
Yeah. So for me, it's, without sounding highfalutin, like thinking of what your investment philosophy is. And that to me just simply means what asset class, what area, what type of return do you want? So I was sent a property actually just yesterday, and it was 18 unit multifamily apartment building. So we're looking at the data room and we're going through the rent rolls and, doing everything that we typically do. Is it in the right geography? Yeah. Is it one that we're in? No. usually what I immediately do is I look at the town, the city, what's the immigration like, what are the major industries, is it monopolized by one industry, and if that industry falls off, we're going to have an issue. So I start looking at the larger risks, the ones that if this happens, it'll blow up our deal or substantially impact it. And then after that, getting more granular, look at the valuation and the pro forma that the agent gave you, because it's always the wrong one, and figure out building your own and seeing, okay, they put $400 a unit for repair and maintenance. That's the average in North America is 1,000. So let's bump up all those, and then kind of creating that pro forma, and then seeing, does the capitalization rate make sense if it's a fully occupied or stabilized building, or is there value add to be had with the rent roll? So to answer that question with the example from yesterday, we just didn't see any upside in the rent roll. The owner before did a great job. They stabilized the rents. They've probably made a bunch of money, or will make a bunch of money on it. But basically, it's a coupon clipper at this point. It's got stabilized rent, and you're going to be able to have good positive cash flow if you leverage, if you don't leverage too much. So we're kind of on the opposite end. We want to find things where our loan to value might be a little bit higher than more an investor with more experience or more capital, and we'll look at kind of trying to boost the rents. If there's a couple vacancies, that's gravy for us, and that's really where we can add value. Obviously, can't be too many vacancies, because then you run into the problem of actually financing it. So kind of all of that really factors in, and once you do this for a while, you can do all that stuff pretty quickly, and you can see right away if somebody sends you something, and you just know that these the numbers don't make sense, and then you kind of go from there. But that's the way I do it.
So really, when you break it down, it's more or less, does this fit into my criteria? And if it does, that's something that you'll go forward with. So,
yeah,
good point. Have a set of criteria, and now go out and see if something fits into it. If it doesn't, maybe look somewhere else.
Yeah, and Rob, what's nice about having partners too is once you build, whether it's your network or actual formal partners that invest with you, then that criteria can kind of expand, right? You can have, if I have buddies that are their partners are in construction, so their criteria can be twofold. Maybe it's stabilized multifamily, but hey, we have a value add opportunity that needs medium to substantial construction, and now they have a wider pool of investments that they can put offers on and take down.
Very good. I like that.
I think we touched on it, but I wanted just clarity on it a little more, because you said you started out at 20. A lot of people might have, most people probably are pretty nervous regardless, but let alone at the age of 20 to jump into something. And analysis paralysis, talking about that, but really when you're 20 years old, how the heck do you get over that hump of if you're even a millennial in general, how do you get over that hump of jumping into this if it's not a familiar space, and maybe you've got some education, but how do you ultimately really pull that trigger? Because it's a tough one. I imagine at 20, you've got to be fairly scared.
And I'll that before you answer. You mentioned that the property was, I think, $250,000 or something like that. So we look back on that now and we go, oh wow, like, man, I wish we could find that again. That's so cheap. But at the time, that's a very daunting number for somebody, at that time, your age, right?
Yeah, for sure. And 250 was high to us at the time, right? There was stuff in the hundreds. And the way I normally answer that is I was lucky in a sense that, a number of ways, but like I said, my family's entrepreneurial, and my dad, his family immigrated over here. They started an automotive garage. So he understands the idea of being entrepreneurial. In addition to that, one of his best friends to this day is a real estate investor. So also seeing a little bit, not that he was explicitly supportive, right? Because I was in school, but I was lucky from that point of view. And I think also fortunate that, at the time we always think, like we're talking about now, everything is expensive, but back then cap rates were still, there was still a decent spread between lending rates and cap rates. Whereas now the thing that I get asked the most for somebody that's trying to jump in is I can't afford to get into this market. Most people can't unless they're putting 40% down payments. And that's true if you're staying in LA, New York, downtown Toronto, Vancouver, where your cap rates are 2.8, right? It's just, you just can't do that unless you have enough capital. So the first thing I say to somebody that's kind of nervous about getting in is, obviously, do your research, look at markets where you're going to have that spread and you're going to be able to do that. So whether that's going into Durham, Hamilton, even further outside of the core area that you're in, wherever that is, Montreal, Vancouver. And then basically for myself, what kind of got me over the mental hump was, like a lot of real estate investors that you've probably interviewed, a lot of the books I read at that time were, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, the Canadian versions of the real estate investing books. I can't remember. Don Campbell, I think, had a bunch of them back in the day. And then I still think Canadian real estate magazines around. But if you guys remember, social media was around, but it was 08, 09, and we were still going to Chapters and buying Canadian real estate magazines. And they always had a feature of like the feature investment property. And it was like some teacher in Windsor, and you're like, all right, that could be me. So I think getting exposure to the industry, and lastly, I'll just say, for anybody that hasn't gotten into real estate and wants to break in, try to find meetups in your local area. Try to find investor groups or real estate groups, and just immerse yourself into people that have done it. And you're going to see right away that it's not rocket science.
All great points. And I think, like, in summary of that, it's like your environment, right? You got to get in the right environment to where other people are doing it. And it's not unusual to be going and buying properties. A lot of people, you mentioned maybe you're lucky to grow up in that environment a little bit with people you were kind of born into this world to be around. Not everyone maybe has that, but you can go find that. You can go find your meetup groups. You can go find your clubs and stuff to go immerse yourself in that environment where it's not weird to buy 20 investment properties a year or buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. Like, those groups exist. Go find yourself some mentors, go find a place where that's not unusual. And all of a sudden you'll be the weird one not doing that stuff. And it'll be so much easier to take that hump, get over that hump. Right.
And we've all been there 100%. I remember, if you look back, one of the guys I had on my podcast was talking about, you have somebody that goes to med school, and it's a path that so many of us are familiar with. He doesn't come out. He's always studying. And everybody's would champion that. But when you're a young investor, he never comes out. He's always reading about this. He's looking at these investments, and suddenly it's just like you're a pariah. It's like, that's a weird path until you buy properties and become successful in the industry. And I remember when I started, not dissimilar, I'm sure from a lot of people that are listening, students, especially student rentals, they're going to tear apart the place. What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? So and it's hard to push through that unless, like you're saying, find a group of people that have done that. And then you'll find out really quickly that they'll say, everybody gets told that it's bullshit. If you're careful, you can be successful in this area.
Or everybody tells you that, and here's what you do if that happens. There's also that too, right? Like, because for every problem that's happened, there's somebody out there that's already been through it. So, especially with student rentals and that kind of thing, there's so many different stories and so many different things that can happen with them, that every single problem that you can think of, somebody else in student rentals probably already had that issue, and they could tell you how to navigate through it. Right? It's not, you can't. It's that you might need a little bit of guidance in order to do it.
Yeah. And, the funny thing too, with student rentals, if I hear somebody saying that to anybody, the first thing, well, first of all, today, the student rentals are built like prisons. They're, you're not breaking anything in a lot of these concrete structures. But what I've told people in the past that, oftentimes it's almost more bulletproof, the income. You have a parent usually guaranteeing the capital. They don't want to embarrass their kid because it's a kid usually living with other people. And then the reality is, the one thing that we struggle with outside of student rentals is the rent control that we have in Ontario, compared to a lot of our, friendly neighbor states down south, is that in student rentals, you mark to market every 3 years pretty much, right? If rents go up $40 in a certain area in Toronto, you can only put the guideline up, right? You can only do, not even next year, I guess, but normally, 1-2%. Whereas student rentals, if there is that $40-$50 uptick per student, after you have your 3 years, you have a new cohort of students. So you can, reset your rents.
Makes sense. Yeah, student rentals have a lot. There's pros and cons to every strategy, right? There's definitely some pros with the student rentals on the revenue side. I agree. How do you go about managing, whether it's student rentals or you mentioned, I know living in Toronto and having apartments out here in Hamilton or other areas you're looking at. How do you go about managing buildings or student rentals from a distance?
Yeah, I mean, props to property managers. They, the really good property managers. It's a tough job for anybody, but it's nobody calls you and say, "Hey, nothing's happening. You're doing a great job." I haven't had any calls, right? So, when they do their job, nobody really praises them for it. So, what I do is I usually, for the Hamilton, just as an example, I interviewed, I think three property managers. We, looked at Googled, property managers in Hamilton, looked at the reviews, and then basically took each one of them out for a Tim Hortons coffee and just asked, how do you do, sell me basically, what do you guys do? And what I try to do is tell property managers, especially, don't do it if it's not true. But if you go into an area and you say, we're looking at building a portfolio in this particular area, we'd love to kind of have you on board and hopefully grow with us. And oftentimes one thing I tell people that are investing in an area that want to know about the area, I oftentimes connect with property managers before I even buy a property in the area. So that was the case with Hamilton, because property managers have a wealth of knowledge that I think that often goes untapped. So if you're looking at an area that you've never invested in, call a property manager and just be honest with them. Be like, listen, I'm looking to buy properties here. Here is a rent roll for a property that I'm looking at. Does this make sense to you? This is an area that I'm looking at. And sometimes property managers will say this is completely off. These rents are way too low, or don't touch this area. It's next to this place, and this place is a known area for crime. So they often give you these like crucial bits of information. And then once you do take down a property, then you can call them up and say, "Hey, listen, remember we were talking, we'd like to have you on board." And from there, the management is really dependent on how they manage and how you want to have a manager. So, I know getting granular, some people like to have, the property manager transfer them all the capital. Some people like using their own accounting systems. And I've had property management companies that have said, no, we do everything on our end, and then, we'll send you everything. So I think it's a combination of finding the person that gels with you. And yeah, I've had, over the years, I've had some challenges with some property managers, but the nice thing with the property management industry is it's so competitive. So if you're having a challenge, find another one.
I think that's a great advice. Actually, getting knowledge from the property managers have some really, really good stories, really good insight that probably most realtors even won't have, or other professionals in that sort of space in local markets, right? They've probably dealt with the worst of worst or the best of best situations and everything in between. So actually, it's something we don't talk a lot about is actually going out and doing that. But I think that's a great piece of advice. Realtors and property managers probably are the two with the most knowledge, but realtors, as we know, case by case with who you're dealing with. Property managers, that's all they do is they're managing rental properties, right? So
it's nice too, because you go in before the relationship's established. Like you and I as agents, we're going to be biased to the deal completing. Whereas if you go into property manager, like I've seen some crazy, like, don't touch this building because I know these 3 individuals moved there and they are nothing but a nightmare. They're professional tenants, so you can't get that boots on the ground level by just, going on MLS or, just putting offers out.
Mm-hmm. True enough.
I agree.
Let's talk about your biggest tip that you have for anyone getting started.
It's short and sweet. Just start. And that doesn't mean buy a property tomorrow. That might be, the educational piece. Like one nice thing, I think you guys said you're doing this podcast for 7-8 years now. Is
almost 7.
That's crazy for like podcasting. That's like an eternity. Congratulations on that. But basically the point is when I started in real estate and people started prior to that, there was, no podcast at that time. I don't even think, 08, 09, really the podcast space.
No Canadian ones, right? Probably maybe bigger pockets was coming or almost there.
Yeah, that was a great point.
Just before us. Like not even a year before us, I don't think.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? So yeah, there was nothing then. There was nothing then.
Yeah. So I think for people, it's just we have so many resources today. If you want to learn something today, there's literally no excuse. It's just a matter of getting the information that's out there and then having the discipline to take it in and execute. So for me, starting in real estate, that's usually building that education. And again, that can be done through podcasts, through books, through meetups, and then actually learning. But I can't remember the quote. Something, what was it? If information was the key, we'd all have 6-pack abs and be millionaires. So information's obviously a piece, but the execution piece is critical. So, I've seen people that have, and you have probably on the podcast have seen this as well, where you have somebody that's been digesting podcasts, reading books for a year, for 2 years, for 3, and they haven't invested. And so that execution piece, that jumping off piece, that's the scary but critical part. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say there.
Here's my question for you then. How are they to know they have enough information? Because these people that you're talking about, they don't know when the right time is. So how are they to know when they've got enough information to go out and do it?
So I'm going to give the answer that I always get. I don't have kids, but when you say to people, when's the right time? And they're like, there's never a right time. There's never going to be a right time. It is your, if you don't have kids and you buy a property, it's your baby at that point. And I don't think there is any clear-cut time that's right. But I think to not completely not answer that question, I think that through learning, the hope is that once an investment fits the criteria that you've decided to be in, so maybe that is duplexes in southeastern Ontario. There's a certain point where you have to be honest that okay, this matches up to what I'm looking for, and that should be the kind of the green light for you to invest, and hopefully all the education leads up to that point. But yeah, I don't think it's very difficult to say that there's 100% go to do something. Every deal I've done that I've been the most proud of has been a deal where as the purchase and sale is happening, my stomach is upside down and I'm questioning whether I should be doing this. Is it too big? Is all those questions. So usually that's a good sign for me.
Yeah. And I always go back to that other saying, which goes, the best time to buy real estate was 20 years ago. And the second best time is right now. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Regardless of the market, hot, cold, whatever, honestly, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, if you're looking at unless if you're flipping or something, then maybe that does matter a bit. But for most people, long-term approach, we bought a ton of properties in 2017, hottest market up until maybe today. And, I don't know. I wouldn't really regret any of them. I'd rather have had those properties than have taken the year off and not done anything. Mm-hmm. Right? We've got a lot more wealth there for sure. And yeah, I would never worry about the market being hot or cold, and especially if you're buying long term. Even flipping, right? It doesn't really matter if the deals make sense. It still makes sense. It doesn't matter if the market's hot.
Yeah. Or you just follow every YouTube video I see BREI strategy and just hold the thing. I don't know if that's if you guys have had a lot of people on for BREI, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're flipping and the market is not right and you can stabilize it, rent it, and just hang on to it, maybe refi in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like for flippers, especially, if you've got sort of a backup strategy, if you position yourself where you can do something like that, I mean, let's face it, that's probably the most popular, especially for people starting out, right? So is the BREI strategy to hang on to it. But I'm saying for people who are looking at flipping, should always have sort of a backup strategy, and that would be a good one.
Yeah, I've always, I mean, that's always kind of bewildered me for people. If you're going and flipping, you're going all in, and if the market turns, you're screwed. So, I mean, just on that point, it might as well might be worth mentioning that, you don't have to just completely commit to investment. And, the term house hacking or living with a roommate, buying a place or having a walkout in your basement, like that's a great way to start in real estate. You have somebody helping out with the mortgage. You kind of quasi learn what it means to be a landlord, depending on kind of the arrangement with the person, and say if you know the person or you don't. But that can be a great way to get into real estate and figure out if it's something that you want to continue to do.
True. Good point.
Yeah. As long as you can deal with someone living in your house with you.
Yeah, I mean, and also like, which part is your house? You know, like I had buddies that started with duplexes, right? And you're kind of, you know, you have your place and they have theirs, but yeah, I mean, you pay for privacy, right?
Yeah. I would say that's a great way to start out. But I mean, if you go back and listen to some of the episodes, we've all got stories of things that happened. Like, man, the tenants that I got in my basement,
Oh,
brutal.
one of those stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. We've all heard those stories. My sister and her fiance, same issue. And oftentimes, you know, that's a good point that a lot of times you're not prepared for that. And I think that's a good thing to be aware of. Like, we're not all going to be lawyers by investing in real estate, but just knowing what to and to not do. And also being honest about understanding that Canada is very tenant centric. And, you know, as a landlord, you make a couple mistakes, you can eat it on some investments. So just being cautious of that. Nothing unsurmountable, but just being aware of how to operate as a landlord.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's lots of good resources for that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
plenty of them.
Before we round off here with the show here, I wanted to ask you just kind of finalize the commercial one, because it was a good little chat earlier on about that. But where do you see that actually? Like, where is that now? Where's that going in the future? Because I think it's a very, very strange time with that space, especially being downtown Toronto, where I know you focus a lot. What's happening there for the future? Like, what's the outlook for the next year or 2 years? Is it kind of worrisome for most people? For you in your space, like, what does it look like?
I mean, it's not, you know, like the easiest way to answer the question is because it's asset specific. So retail it's a big question mark. I just think there's been a trend towards e-commerce and online. And I just think like I said before, there's going to be repositioning of those assets over time. I think that's fairly obvious. I'm not saying anything crazy. On the industrial side, I think is going to be strong. Like I said before, the fulfillment centers and warehousing, those are continuing to be drivers of the building of industrial. Multi-residential, I think over the 6 to 12 months really depends on CERB and the actual government assistance. So in the States, I can't remember if they finished it, but it was $640 a week. And even my tenants were making more money on this government assistance, some of them, than they were without the government assistance. So that, I think 6 to 12 months in multifamily is really going to depend on the support from the feds. After that, I think multifamily is always going to be a great asset class. I just think, you know, we, especially in Canada, a lot of immigrants that come over, and we have a great, robust immigration system, and oftentimes their first house is an apartment building. On the office side, man, I wish I could tell you it's my bread and butter, and it's, you know, the valuation of buildings, especially downtown Toronto, are predicated on leases, and leases are, you know, interest of companies. So really, we're betting on the companies in the Canadian market, you know, from the tech sector to insurance to real estate. So I'm hoping that we, you know, slowly recover, but just keep in mind that we've had one of the most historically low vacancy rates, in office in North America at 2.8% in the downtown core. That's not a healthy market at all. So if anything, if we come out of this at 7 to 9%, that's not, you know, that would be great for both landlords and tenants, because what's happened over the last 5 years in the office environment is landlords who have kind of a pretty much an oligopoly. Really, there's only a few big landlords, right? The Cadillacs, the Brookfields, the Oxfords, and they've basically set the terms for tenants. And I think that has been really unfortunate for tenants, that I now hope as we come out of this will balance. The real downside is what happens between then. You know, when do we get to a place where we have an economy that's moving again? And unfortunately, this is not like other recessions. We kind of forced the shutdown because we needed to. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on commercial. But yeah, I'd love office to come back, because that's how I put food on the table.
Awesome. That's insightful. That's good. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, listen, man, you've given us a lot today. Appreciate you coming on. We want to talk about how people can get in touch with you. So what's the best way for people to reach out?
Yeah. You know, you can just type Jesse Fragale, Fragale. If you want to send me a note, usually I check Instagram. So if you DM me on Instagram, if you have any questions, but yeah, YouTube, Instagram, or just Google it. I'm sure my mug will show up at some point.
and look up Working Capital, the show.
Yeah.
They can find you through that, of course, all podcast platforms. And I guess that's pretty much a wrap. Rob?
Yeah, we'll put all of those links that you just mentioned in our show notes, and that way people can get that information nice and easy. Get the spelling your name and all that kind of stuff. And thanks again for being here. Appreciate it. And of course, I got to ask Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
289-389-6846 or Sandy at McKayRealtyNetwork.com.
And you can reach me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca. Sandy, what did your shirt say? I've been trying to find out.
Never settle, never give up.
Right on.
Sorry, I'll tilt it a bit down next time.
Till next time, everybody, never settle, never give up.
Nice.
See you later.